Hi, my name is Sara Mononen, and I'm a dear friend of Sharada's, and she invited me to share on the Be Woman online presence this Sunday. I actually tried doing this a few Sundays ago, but we had some technical difficulties, so it's a real pleasure to be sharing now. This is pre-recorded, just so you know, just so I didn't run into any more trouble. Yeah, so like I said, I'm a friend of Sharada, and she asked me to share about my art. Art has been really instrumental in my own healing journey, and I've learned to come to it as a place of refuge, as a place of insight, and as a place of just expression. Because, as you know, expression is very important. And sometimes we don't yet have the courage to express what we feel, or the words to express what we feel. So I find art a really wonderful way to do that, because it takes us beyond words to those places inside where we maybe felt pain or even joy, but before words could happen. So I figured today what I would do is I would not share a lot of practical things necessarily, but share my story of how I came to art, how I work, how I go about, especially with painting. That's what I'm going to focus on today. And also how you can overcome any blocks that you might feel or resistance you might feel in foraying into an artistic realm as a means of self-discovery or healing or just for fun. Yeah. So how I came to art. Let's start there. I've always done artistic things. I was never really the athlete necessarily. I always did dance. I started doing ballet when I was really, really young. And piano. I took piano lessons. And drama, especially in primary school and even high school. I participated in various drama productions. So those were always my means of expression in the beginning. Unfortunately, when I got to high school, something happened, something shifted, and I had a few real artistic road bumps. Having to do with the people that were instructing me at the time. And I made a few blunders, and being quite an overly sensitive child and teenager, I didn't feel supported in what I was doing anymore. Yeah, sometimes when we get to a point where it gets really difficult, we kind of hit places in ourselves that we really need good coaching to face. And I didn't find I had that. Maybe I could have had that if I was able to articulate what was going on, but for me, it was very complex, my emotions around it. So I kind of dropped everything. I stopped doing ballet, I stopped playing piano, taking lessons anyway. And I went into more academic pursuits. Where to from there? Yeah, I guess in high school I remember being fascinated with the art room, the art department. And I remember walking down the hallway of my high school. I went to this high school that was massive, like a big castle, literally. And it had very high ceilings. And I remember poking my head in the art room often, but I never dared go in. And I don't really know what that fear was about, but it's just something I never did. And when I got to university, I took a drama course, and again, stumbled over my lines at one point, forgot my lines, it hit a place inside where I didn't know what I needed, and I couldn't ask for it. And I didn't receive it either, the coaching I needed to help me over those bumps. So I let that go too. And I ended up studying psychology, and I think in an attempt to really understand what was going on in my inner world and recognizing I had all these things to express inside, yet kept seeming to hit up against road bumps continually. my computer went off there, sorry. So years went by, and I dabbled in things. I still played piano from time to time, and I found myself painting pottery at one point, and that was quite nice. But yeah, years went on, and I ended up in Bali, where I lived for 10 years, and that's when the creative fire really started burning hot. I was teaching at an international school, and my first year I taught grades 7 and 8. My second year I taught student support, so I worked one-on-one with children with emotional and academic difficulties and challenges. And I worked in a place called the Heart of School, and the art department and the drama department were quite close by. And every day when I was working with these students, while I was very present with them, it's like my whole body was gravitating towards what people were doing in the arts, the painting and the acting and the imaginative realm. And I always incorporated a lot of those things into my lessons with students too. And eventually I had to admit to myself that as much as I liked teaching, I wanted to be the one that was doing all these artistic things. Rather than guiding the children through it, I wanted to do it. And I think it was, admitting and finally realizing that I needed to meet those unmet needs in myself, those places where I never got to express fully or explore fully. So I quit my job, big bold move, and I took a year and I started studying painting with a teacher that I found out about. His name was Kikuo Mori. A beautiful old Japanese man who had studied art in New York and had been living in Bali for, I think, 25, 30 years. And he held classes at his studio every Saturday afternoon. And I ended up attending his classes for 5 years straight, every Saturday. And what I loved about Mori was that he really held a beautiful space for you to explore, and he never insisted that you paint what he wanted. He really encouraged you to just freely explore and express. There were of course, images you could paint from for inspiration, or if you wanted to do more technical art, of course you were welcome to. But the space he held was just perfect for me, because I had finally reached a point in my own heart and maturity where I could really come at this fully free and uninhibited. And that's exactly what I did. It's what I wanted to do, and it's what I did. At the time, I was deeply in my studies of Vedanta, and I was also studying craniosacral therapy, so there was a lot churning on the inside. And so having that underpinning all my artistic pursuits really fueled a lot of wondrous explosions of color and form on the canvas that actually kind of blew me away. And I was surprised by how natural it felt for me, and how uninhibited I was, and fearless I was in trying new things and experimenting. And but like I said, I finally found the kind of mentor I needed that held the right kind of space for me. That's not to say that it was easy. There was some times where, my feathers got ruffled, or I felt challenged in ways that were uncomfortable, but I have immense gratitude to Mori, and for the door that he opened for me in terms of my own self-expression. I found that I'm actually very deeply informed by the wisdom of the living world. What often came through in my paintings was anatomy and plants and the feminine essence, very feminine yin style. And also, when Instagram came to the fore, I found myself most drawn to the living world, like to plants and flowers and animals and these types of things. And color is a big one for me. color is what really kind of was the starting point of each of my paintings. So yeah, it was really nice to discover in myself this hidden confidence, and to really come at something really with joy and a real depth of not seriousness, but I took my art seriously because I saw what it was giving me, what it was providing for me. Discipline, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. I came at it with great discipline, always showing up every Saturday to explore something new. So that was very rewarding. Yeah, okay, so I guess now I'll share with you a bit about how I work. Well, how I used to work. I mean, I started this painting journey in 2011, and yeah, like I said, it went straight through for 5 years. Maury passed away in 2015, which was a really profound year for me. There was a lot of deaths that year that I needed to face from beloved mentors. And after that, I kind of took a hiatus off of painting. And then I found myself diving into sculpture and ikebana. So those were the next explorations of mine. But I want to come back to painting and focus there because I feel like what I'm sharing, I hope, can inform your own process if this is something that you feel like diving into for insight or healing. Now, I always painted with oil paints. Prior to coming to Maury, I had done a lot of exploration with chalk pastel, which are also wonderful to work with. And first I want to explain why those two different mediums are great. Chalk pastel is very cost-effective. You can find it everywhere. The colors are quite vibrant. And what's nice about chalk pastel is that you can make very thin, sharp lines, you can make very wide, soft lines, and you can blend the colors. So it's very good to learn how to do light, shadow, form, and even blending colors together. I had a lot of fun with those. Oil paint is much the same, to be honest, in my perception. It's very sensual, which I love. Very sensual, because you're working with oil, and the colors are quite rich, and it can almost operate like watercolor if you add more oil, or it can be very thick and pasty and textured if you use less oil. It doesn't dry quick like acrylics, so rather than having a painting that's very layered, you can continually shift and move and let the colors bleed together and blend, and it's this constantly shifting, moving landscape, which is much like our own mind and inner world and emotional being. So in that sense, it makes for a wonderful mirror. And I really liked that aspect of it. Okay, so how I eventually came to work, I really made these Saturdays a ritual. It's fine to sit and know that you maybe have some stuff bubbling up inside, but until you take an action on it, until you put that into some kind of form, often it just kind of sits there. So whether that's writing about it, or doing a small puja about it, or painting a picture, or doing a dance, it doesn't matter. But it needs to move in some way and be given form. So what I would do is I would go every Saturday and sit and often pick a new canvas. And first I would pick the canvas. It's sometimes a small one, sometimes a larger one, sometimes more square, sometimes more rectangular. It was based on intuition. And I would sit, and the next thing I would do would be to choose colors. And that was a purely intuitive, emotional choice. I would basically look at all the different paint tubes that he had laid out and pick usually 2 or 3. If you go with more than that, it can get a little muddy too quick. So I would pick 2 or 3 colors that really I could feel in my body, that really spoke to me. And then I would sit and I would place my hands on the canvas. I would close my eyes. Often I would chant to Saraswati, the goddess of art and knowledge, and just invoke that whatever was ready to be felt and seen and which could reflect back insight to me for my own journey and unfoldment, that would be so. And from there, I would simply get the paints ready on my palette with my oil, pick a few brushes, or sometimes I just use my hands, and I would really, from a very unconscious, playful place, just like a child, like a small child would paint, just start marking up the canvas. So, yeah, and my goal was to not stop. If I stopped for too long, that meant I was going into thinking mode. And what I wanted to do was really come from a very primal, instinctual place. So I would just start marking up the canvas and putting colors here and there, and breathing. It's important to breathe and just play, you know. Sometimes I would have a vision of a stroke to make, or see on the canvas where I could make a mark. So it's not that it was only informed by pure physical instinct. There were other senses informing me. But the point was, it was constantly in motion. So when you do this, eventually all this abstraction starts to harmonize with your emotional body, or whatever is going on inside. And it's from this place that forms start to manifest, forms start to appear, and you can start to see things in the painting. It's not just an abstract mess anymore. And from here, I would move from a more instinctual place where I'm moving more towards composition. So it's a little more measured, a little more careful. It's almost like uncovering something. So you're watching and you're seeing what's underneath. Or like when you shake a Polaroid picture and the image starts to come and manifest before you. So whatever shape I saw first, I started moving towards that and giving it form. And that was always really fun, because I never knew what was going to come. It was always a major surprise party every time. So it was like opening a gift, you know. Sometimes the things that came through were quite odd. Like I said, like strange anatomical forms, or often fingers came through. Like it was really strange. And what I loved about this is that when I just allowed these forms to present themselves, over time, I realized that I would revisit colors, and symbols would revisit me. So it started, not that I could always make sense of why they were there. I didn't paint trying to figure anything out. It was more just an unconscious exploration, almost like going on a shamanic journey, and just witnessing what comes, being available to what was presenting itself. So that's basically how I went about it. And sometimes things would end up remaining quite abstract. You know, there'd be some identifiable forms or patterns. Sometimes it would turn into a literal image, you know, of something very concrete, like a flower, or very clear body parts of some kind. And through that also, I started to experiment with different techniques. So I just invent things. I just on impulse and intuition, I would just try stuff. You know, maybe start with charcoal first, or drip oil all over the canvas and kind of see what, like a Rorschach, and see what I saw, and then use that to paint something. So I really went about this in a very playful way, and it felt so good, because growing up, when I was doing classical ballet and classical piano, being classically trained, yes, you get very masterful with techniques, but sometimes at the expense of just raw expression. So to be able to come to painting through the other door, where I didn't really have any technique to start with, but just to come from raw expression and then let the technique come afterwards was really fun and really interesting. Yeah, so that's how that went. From there, I think what I want to share is that as you paint, it's really important, in my perception, to treat it as a feeling exercise. It's not just a visual exercise. So yes, the canvas can be a mirror. It's a constantly shifting mirror of your own mind and emotions. And the beauty of it is that you can change it. You know, so if you see something you don't like, you can change it. If you see something you do like, you can admire it a while and really appreciate it and figure out, what is it exactly that you like? Is it the shape of the line? Is it the tone of the color? Is it just how it felt creating that? So that's really beautiful. But by making it a feeling exercise, that's where it's therapeutic in my mind. Because sometimes, literally, without a word of a lie, I would be sitting in front of the canvas and just making a stroke would be like, oh, and I would feel it in my body. So I really kind of saw what was on the canvas as a representation of my own inner world. And I loved how I could move it and shift it, and the feelings that would come as a result of that. And I also loved how, you know, sometimes if I had a lot of anger or unsavory feelings with seemingly no outlet, I could really just take paint and splash it on the canvas and throw it and, you know, rub the charcoal into the canvas. But then when I got that energy out and put it outside of me and could look at it, and then I'm gifted with the ability to transform it and transmute my own emotions into something so beautiful. One of my favorite paintings happened like that. It was a really magical thing. I was in a very dark place within myself, and I knew I needed to express something, and the colors I wanted were orange, yellow, and gold. I think it was orange, yellow, and gold. And I didn't have those paints on me at the time, so I literally very impulsively got on my motorbike and I went to the paint store. I walked in, I got the paints, I got to the cash register, and they told me how much it was, and I realized I didn't bring my bank card, but I had, not a word of a lie, the exact amount of money in my purse for those 3 tubes of paint. And I got them, and I went back to where I was staying. I moved all this energy through, just made clouds of mess on this canvas. Billowing clouds of reds, no, not reds, oranges and yellows and golds, and it was magnificent. But it was kind of like, what is it? So I remember with great excitement, I took it to Maury that Saturday, and I showed him. And he looked at me very quietly, as he did, and he said, paint over it. And I said, what? And he handed me this tube of burnt umber. And he said, just paint over it. So I trusted him, and I did. I painted over the whole thing with burnt umber. And then he gave me a rag, and he said, now I want you to go exploring and wipe away different parts of the painting and see what you find. And I did. And it turned into a really phenomenally beautiful painting, which I called Heat and Light, because that's exactly what happened. I felt the heat of fires raging inside of me, and what it turned into was a painting of great light and beauty. So, yeah, so that's what I wanted to share about that. Okay, blocks. How can you overcome blocks? Resistances. Well, sometimes there just needs to be a basic readiness. Like in my own case, I don't know why in high school I never wanted to go in the art room. I'm not going to try and justify it. I just didn't. And in a sense, I think I'm really happy that I came to art when I did, in my late 30s, I guess it was, mid to late 30s, because I was able to come at it with a lot more maturity, a lot less self-judgment, and a lot more fun. And I knew what I wanted. It was the first time I think I felt my heart literally speak so clearly. It was like there was a physical sensation in my heart saying, you need to paint. And I listened and I did it. So in that sense, trust your own timing, you know? There's no need to force yourself into something that you're not ready for, or that doesn't feel organically like it's ready to pop. But it's important not to misinterpret that for fear either, because sometimes, you know, as we all know, fear arises, but we know it's something we need to do. So if that happens, I encourage you to really try, because you really have nothing to lose. There's always another canvas, always. So that's the beauty of it. It's kind of like you get to try out life. I mean, you're creating. We're creative beings. That's what we do. We're infinitely creative. I mean, look at the world. It's phenomenal. So it's kind of like a practice arena when you have a canvas. I mean, by some people's accounts, they might look at my life and think I'm quite daring. But to be honest, I'm actually quite cautious. My personality is quite cautious. I really think things through before I make any big leaps or changes. But when I'm ready, and I do it. So the canvas allowed me to really express those courageous sides of myself that don't hesitate, that don't wait until I'm ready, and just be willing to try and experiment. So there was great freedom in that. The other thing I want to share is that make sure you're in a really warm space, a really comfortable space, that you feel comfortable, that you're surrounded by, if you're with other people, surrounded by supportive people that are not there to judge what you create or criticize what you create, but just to be there creating together. And if you do it on your own, that's okay too. But make the space beautiful. Make it a sacred space. Because what you create and what comes out of you is the most precious thing, really. I mean, think about a child's art. Would you ever tell the child that their tree doesn't look perfect, or the person's hands are too spiky looking, or they've got too many fingers? Never. You would praise them to no end. And children's art is so beautiful because it's so spontaneous, because it's so honest. And that's one thing Maury shared with me too. He said, you know, great art isn't necessarily what's most beautiful, it's what's the most honest. And I always remembered that. And I've noticed in my own art too, even I can tell on my own paintings if there's a stroke or a motion that I've made that hasn't come from a real honest place, where I was trying to, it doesn't work. I see the difference. So allow yourself to really create from a place of honesty, and let your child play, your inner child play, because it loves it. And another thing I want to share is a quote by an artist named John Fisher. A friend of mine introduced me to this man, and I read an article of his. And I think he sums it up really well. And this is exactly the sentiment that I came to painting with. And he said, the point is not to achieve some goal, but of being open to the possibility of witnessing and participating in the magic and the wonder of creation. And I get tingles as I say that, because it really is the point. Because you start to see, it's very integrative painting to me, because you're employing so many different senses. There's smell of the oil, there's your visual sense, There's color that's speaking to your emotional sense. There's a physicality to it because you're moving and how you position your body. There's so much involved, and if you put music on, then the mood of the music can inspire what you're creating. So there's so much happening, and to see how all these things factor in to create this imagery on canvas, these forms on canvas, these colors on canvas, is really remarkable. And over time, to see how your painting evolves and develops, and what repeating patterns come, what colors you gravitate towards. All of these are informing your own self, your own soul, your own story. So I always describe my own painting anyway as a moving mythology of my inner world. And that's how I really consider it. I have to say, like I said, I took some years off of painting, and I've gone through kind of a dry spell that way. But recently, I felt inspired to start another painting, and it was based on, actually, a Stevie Wonder album that I was listening to called The Secret Life of Plants. And I had this stroke of inspiration where how cool would it be to do paintings inspired by this music. And so I started something new. It's very unlike my other paintings, so it shows me that within myself I've reached a new place. I'm expressing in a different way. It's still information, but I'll make sure I post it up on the Be Woman Sisterhood site when it's ready to be presented. But I'm really excited. It feels really good to be painting again and be expressing in a new way that informs me and my own journey in a new way too. So I realize this is maybe shorter than some of the other talks that I've seen that have been so wonderful, but I feel at this point that's what I feel to share. If any of you are interested, you can check out my website. I'll leave the link under the post. If you go to painting and sculpture, you'll see a portfolio of all my paintings, or most of my paintings to date. You can also see the sculpture I do. My ikebana work is on there. And I'm also a craniosacral therapist, so that's another way I go into the subtle world and have the motions of the body express, and that turns into sometimes words or feelings or experiences for the client, but also for myself. So yeah, I thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I hope some of what I've shared informs your own journey in some way, or inspires you in some way. And if anyone's interested in somewhat of a more technical sharing about how to use the materials or something like that, I'm happy to share that at another time. But in the meantime, I hope you find the courage to get out some colors, whether they be chalk pastels or oil pastels or watercolor or whatever medium you choose, and express yourself. Yeah, it's really great fun. And to do it in a group is also great fun. I did that with my friends in Bali quite often. And when I painted at Maury's, there was always a group of us. And one of my favorite things was when we all finished, he'd hang all our art on the wall. And you'd see how even though we were in our own headspace and our own internal process with what we were creating, there was a thread through all of them. At least I could see it. And I could see how, there is a collective mind. There's a collective sentiment and theme that we all share and manifest together. So that's always interesting to explore. But painting on one's own is such a beautiful thing too. It's very quiet and meditative, and you can really go deep within yourself and into your own imaginative realms and journey. It's a real journey. So yeah, but it can be very light. It need not be so deep and heavy. All right, thank you so much. I feel really blessed to be able to share, and I look forward to seeing more videos of what the other beautiful women in this group have to share with us. All right, take care.